So welcome everybody to the Theraphi event. So we've got a few more people coming in. We had over 200 people registering for this event, but obviously we don't expect 200 people. You will be getting the recording sent out, so don't worry about that. We'll be sending it out. Just give us, you know, a day or two to get that out to you. So my name's Roger Green, and I've been involved with the Theraphi right from the beginning. And I think most people might have checked out theraphi.tech, or you've received an email from me about the Theraphi. You know, we do have a database at theraphi.tech if you ever want to join the newsletter. And we do have some exciting events coming up. For instance, in November, the 5th to the 7th, we're putting on our Breakthru-Technologies conference. So that's a whole smorgasbord of advanced energy systems. So I'll tell you a little bit about that later on. I'm going to hand it over to Paul because we want to cover as much material as we possibly can today. So welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Roger. Good to be here. It's been a long time. Good to see everybody. Welcome to the little presentation here. I guess we're going to talk about mostly a bit about Theraphi, and I think the big part of this is to have a lot of participation from everybody, and I'll do a little presentation, and afterwards we can get some stories and things. I'd like to hear how everybody's using the Theraphi, and I know there's a lot of people out there tuning in with the clinics and whatnot. So we'll get started with the presentation here. Share the screen. Okay. Does everybody see that okay?
Yeah, it's come up well, Paul.
Okay. Yep. All right, so we made up this little slideshow from some previous slides. So we're going to talk about Theraphi, and a bit of a disclaimer. Of course, all these things we're talking about aren't really evaluated. It's not a medical device. Theraphi is somewhat of an experimental device used for creating these bioactive fields, and it's pretty well that. So we've talked a lot about history, and if you go back to many of my older videos, kind of went through the history of various people who worked with electricity and its interaction with the body and biological systems over the years. And of course, I got, well, I knew about Nikola Tesla and everything. When I first heard about Royal Rife, I didn't realize that Nikola Tesla had a big part to do with, you know, working with bioactive fields in the early days. There wasn't much literature on Tesla, and there was definitely not much on Royal Raymond Rife either. When I first came across Rife, you know, it was the first ideas we were working with back then was utilizing single frequencies through RF systems, plasma systems, and the concept was much like what Rife was doing. We were looking at targeting specific pathogens, you know, bacteria, viruses, and these frequencies coming from Rife originally, you know, he only had about 12 frequencies that he used on various things. Over the years, of course, a lot of empirical data was gathered, and by that time, about 25 years ago, there's quite a list of different frequencies that people use at different devices. Most of them out there were sort of like the Hilda Clark zapper was a sort of a unit that pulsed electricity in your hands, and that kind of came from John Crane, who was one of Rife's partners that he worked with, doing a lot of the engineering side of things on the mechanical side of things, and he John Crane kind of became the one who said that you could just pulse those frequencies through a handheld pulse and receive them into your body, and it would have effects. But what Rife was using was a plasma tube, and so we worked a lot with those single frequencies and running them in sequence and doing various things with them, targeting various pathogens, basically. And then Anton Perori in France was doing a lot of amazing research with much more powerful fields. And as you can see here, he had, whole rooms full of RF equipment and giant plasma tubes, and they'd have to, bring them up onto the roof and lower them down to the roof with a helicopter. He did a lot of further experimenting with that. The French put in millions of dollars into researching this and came up with some really amazing results, including things like restoring vision and even growing back pieces of the body, like a finger that was removed. And so he kind of disappeared and became part of a lot of these stories you'll hear in history. And Roger, you might want to say something about some of your background on the website on theraphi.tech on some of these.
Sure. So with this, we're not going to spend too long on the background material leading up to the Theraphi invention that Paul and Dan Winter. But essentially on the website, there's some really good information there about the last 100 years of the development of electromagnetic healing. And it takes you through all of these amazing characters in history from Nikola Tesla onwards. And there's also a section there on how it works and, a lot of testimonials. So that's theraphi.tech. So there's some good background material there. And also when I send out the recording to you all, I'll dig up a good presentation that Paul has done in the past about the history of electromagnetic healing. So we'll definitely cover that a little bit more later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Theraphi primarily uses plasma as a sort of a fractal antenna for the field that it creates. And everything in the universe, 99.9% of the universe is in a plasma state. It's basically like if you have solids, liquids, gases, as soon as you have an ionized gas, it's plasma. And everything, all the stars and everything you have, even a flame is a type of plasma. Inside of your lights, fluorescent tubings, it's all plasma. So the way the energetics of the universe works, and the way through all creation initially comes through plasma, and all matter comes into being through that. Well, I've talked on some of my talks about how these currents come in from the sun to the Van Allen belt to the earth, and how it carries ionic streams of different elements into the planet, and they come and go. And these are basically plasma behaves in interesting ways. It likes to follow along magnetic lines, and it creates its own at the same time. And it's very fractal. You can see instances of it from all the way down into mirroring, neural networks to the cosmos and the light tubes and these connections between all the stars. Everything is interconnected, of course. We've said over and over, as the ancients said, it's all one, and everything is thing. And we've kind of proven a lot of this with the modern quantum mechanics, and non-locality, and how everything is interconnected through these ways. And just because we can't measure them, that's been a big problem with modern science, is if they can't measure it, they don't believe it exists. But more and more, as we push the envelope in technology into these higher frequency realms like we're doing now, we're realizing that there's all kinds of subtle interactions at these higher frequencies. And that's a big part of it. You know, when you have a fundamental frequency, as we were doing in the early days with the Rife machine and that, we would take out all the harmonic suppression in the radios we were building. And that way it would allow for this cascade of harmonics. And it's got a lot to do with, you know, whenever you have a fundamental frequency and it's resonating with something, then you get these harmonics. And when you combine frequencies, you get greater harmonics. And so basically what we found is that these devices were having an effect on the body, and many people were claiming, you know, a lot of miraculous things that were happening. So I, you know, looked further and further into this over the years, and basically, if you want to define a biofield, I think we should start there. So it's an organizing principle for the dynamic information flow that regulates biological function, and the idea is to maintain homeostasis. So if you stay on a baseline and you're healthy and your immune system and everything is functioning fine, that's continuously what the body is trying to do. And with all the environmental type impacts and everything, it's been harder, you know, as we've accelerated in chemical manufacturing and electromagnetic waves that we've increasingly built all over the world. Is we've seen more and more disruption in the homeostasis of people in a whole. You can just look at all the diseases that have come about, cancers and heart disease and all the major diseases that have been out have ramped up basically as we've ramped up technologically coming out of the Industrial Revolution, and really increasing chemical production and basically poisoning our environment with a lot of these things. So these biofield interactions have a way of organizing the spatial temporal biologic processes across a whole hierarchy of levels, all the way down to the subatomic level, to the atomic level, molecular level, cellular, organismic, to the interpersonal and cosmic levels. So this is what I'm talking about with harmonics. So even though we say, okay, we're running a certain frequency into this device, it's generating just through the nature of the circuitry itself and the surrounding environment, various other harmonics. And this is a possible explanation for how these systems are working at such a small level when we're looking at the effects of the mitochondria and all the way down to genetic effects. Well, those frequencies would be so high, it wouldn't be possible to produce them. And this is why, you know, science has said, oh, you know, this couldn't possibly resonate those high frequencies to make it. But we're not taking into consideration these very subtle energetics and harmonics, especially in plasma, because the plasma tubes in the Theraphi are specifically designed to generate spin within the plasma, and as all those little eddy currents form, they all have frequency signatures all the way down. So plasma is like a perfect fractal antenna, basically. And so this influences a variety of biological pathways, biochemical, neurological, cellular processes. They all relate to this electromagnetic fields around them and the correlated quantum information flow. And it's really an information field. It's a lot like Rupert Sheldrake in the morphogenic field is how all biological life is interacting. And we live in this soup of, you know, genetic material that's continuously in communication, and everything's in contact with each other. And everything plays its part in this big picture, all the way down to, you know, viruses and bacteria, up to the larger eukaryotes and animals and plants and everything. It's like a genetic soup that we live in, that's surrounding this ball we call Earth, and it's all interacting. And this is the problem when you try to take the old Newtonian kind of model and look at everything as a mechanistic system and cogs in the wheel. To some extent, from our exterior vantage point of looking at the world like this, it looks like that. But when you really get down to it, you'll see how all these things are so interconnected. So what that basically comes down to is vitality or life force. We talk about longevity a lot. This life force has been given names in various different cultures around the world. In China, you would hear the word chi. In the Hindus in India, we call it prana. Hebrew, ruha. Egyptian, akha. So there's a lot of different in every culture around the world, understanding for this vitality, this life force. So the more you can gather of this life force, then the more healthier you're basically going to be. And we do this through simple things, just by breathing, meditation, food, loving, laughter, passion. It's any of these kind of, you see it connected a lot to the emotions as well. So all these different from the physical body, of course, you have these shells. Then you have the emotional body, mental body, and sort of a spiritual concept and vast cosmic connections from there on. So in a holistic system, you're taking into account all of these fields. And all these fields are affected by the type of fields that we generate with um, the Theraphi. People have had experiences where they went to a Theraphi clinic and they're just an artist or a writer or something like this. And they go strictly into the Theraphi just for their creative inspiration. When they're sitting in there, they'll come up with the ideas for their next sculpture or book or whatever. So that's how it affects on the mental body. We see the emotional aspects to the Theraphi all the time. Some people will go into the field and feel an ecstatic experience and laugh, and others will cry. It just depends on their particular constitution at the time. Because remember, in order to maintain this homeostasis, it's a balancing act. And that's how Theraphi is designed to basically provide a more powerful balancing field around the body to put it into that homeostasis. So it's really the body doing the work, the Theraphi giving you the energy and the potential to do that. There's a lot of different aspects into the Theraphi that are all sort of rolled into one unit. So over the years, I've experimented with RF, pulse, the electromagnetic fields, light, all kinds of different light therapies. Really got into Din Shaw, was another famous person who kind of did a lot of work with light and understanding the light effects on biological systems, and worked with various things like that over the years. So the Theraphi is kind of all a bunch of these different technologies rolled into one. And one of the basic principles that it uses is phase conjugation. We've talked a lot about over the last few years. And it causes, it's basically a physical transformation of a field. And it results in reverse propagation of direction, but it keeps amplitudes and phases. So in the Theraphi, it's working like two buckets going up and down. And there's a masculine and a feminine principles to this. And this is true in electricity. It's about the potential to create the field with the potential. You're utilizing both these aspects of masculine and feminine, and it's essentially those going into play to create this phase conjugation. So your body, when you're lying in between the two tubes, you're part of the circuit. You're a dielectric. You're like a capacitor in the overall circuit, and your body's sort of a non-linear medium, having different densities of tissues, from bone tissue, cartilage tissue, to soft tissue, brain tissue. All these different tissues have different densities. So you become this nonlinear sort of dielectric medium. So your body is basically the phase conjugate mirror and receiving this wide range of frequencies and responding to them. So that's in your body generating a lot of microcurrents, and all these things are created at different wavelengths from the different densities and the phases getting changed within the cells, giving every cell in your body basically a little micro massage. And the research in microcurrents, utilizing them within the body, is starting to become fairly well known, and a lot of people are working with it. So this idea of phase conjugation, the best way to kind of look at it visually, because you can physically do it with phase conjugated mirrors. If you projected a distorted image on a phase conjugated mirror and then run it back through the same distorted object that was distorting the image, you get a restored image. And if you did it off a regular conventional mirror, you would just get twice the distortion. So that gives you a good visual of how that works. Time reversal waves, we've talked a lot about as well. It's a way of signal processing, and we've used it a lot in fiber optics and ultraviolet or ultrasonic systems and things like that, making the waveforms go to a more coherent state. So the idea is, as your cells slowly degrade, the telomerase break off and the cells age, the concept of time reversal is how we use these waveforms to restore a more coherent state into the whatever it is we're projecting it at, in this case, biological systems. And again, that part of the balancing effect that the Theraphi has just allows your body to restore and to remember a more coherent state. And therefore, it's sort of like the longevity process, or even age reversing, that we utilize the Theraphi to bring yourself into a more coherent state. And this is all done with these plasma vortex fields. Of course, there's other components to the Theraphi. Like I was saying, you have electromagnetic fields around the whole device, and you're sitting basically in this field, and that field is being created by these two plasma tubes. Basically, it uses a process of a single wire, what Tesla would have called the single wire power transmission, to light these tubes. So a single wire comes off, each phase comes off at 180 degrees, and the power is created in the field, and it's running through the wires, creating sort of electromagnetism around the wires and the coil. So you're in that field, but you're also getting the photonic emissions from the tubes, and you're getting infrasound from the higher frequencies, and you're just in this encapsulated in the center of these tubes. The original idea came from, I wanted to build a tube that you could get right into, because I knew the sweet spot was basically if you were inside a regular tube and you had an anode and a cathode, the two electrodes in there, the part where all the magic happens and all the what we call energy and everything is manifested into this space, utilizing the potential of the positive and the negative, the male and the female, is right at the center of that. So the idea was to, originally I was thinking, why not build a massive glass tube that was like an MRI machine that you could slide people into, right, to get them right into the center. And then I'd played a lot with single wire transmission over the years, and then I thought about it, and I was like, if you had two plasma tubes running each with a single wire transmission to them, you're in that center spot. You'd be in the sweet spot. And I've called it the null spot, or the 0 point, and that over the years But I think a good name for it that Eric Dollard, if people are familiar with Eric Dollard and his writings and work, he's calling it counterspace, and counterspace makes a lot more sense as a term uh, for that sweet spot in between. This is basically where the fields are canceling each other out. If you picture sort of a vesica Pisces coming together, it's the vesica in the center there is the counter space in there. And we can see that really clearly when you've seen the videos with fluorescent tubes on the Theraphi and the longitudinal waves pumping into the center point and then collapsing and disappearing and going into that counter space, that 0 point between the tubes. So your body is basically being placed into that zone, and that's where a lot of the magic happens. And so the Quantaphi we'll talk about a little bit as well, because a lot of people have been asking where it's at and how it's going. It's good. It's a little bit of a challenge to keep up with the world these days and getting parts and things like that. But the Quantaphi I kind of made so people could experiment sort of on a less powerful scale with creating some of these fields and being able to utilize their own frequencies and making the ability to put complex waveforms into a plasma system. And you can even play music and sound, any sound you like, into um, through the various forms, Bluetooth, uh, RCA inputs, or even having the media on a digital USB stick or something like that. You can plug straight into the Quantaphi, and you can experiment with those different frequencies and sounds yourself. And what we found is Quantaphi is really good at conditioning space. You could, be playing Tibetan monks or mantras or whatever it is you like, classical music into there. You don't necessarily have to hear it. You can just have it on in your space. You can place the tubes 20 feet apart, and they have a pretty good field about 20 feet around each of them. You can put multiple tubes and make a fancy array of the plasma tubes, which gets really interesting. You're adding more geometry to the system. Of course, the Theraphi and the Quantaphi are all based on these geometric principles. Phi ratio is incorporated everywhere from the windings of the coils to the shapes of the tubes. So the whole principle behind these devices is to work in harmony with nature, because that's where we're going to find the real solutions. And, mankind has always ran into problems like the problems we're in now with environmental and all these things. It's because we keep going against nature, and it's like smashing your head against the wall. And I think this has sort of impeded our progress. We have to understand what the ancients were saying, what the alchemists were saying. You have to learn from nature, like Victor Schauberger, right? When you observe nature and you emulate nature and you go along with the process of nature, this is true alchemy. This is how you aid in evolution. And this has to do with consciousness, it has to do with physical things and environmental and everything. So, part of the process that we're in right now in this little birthing canal compression is that this is a part of it. It's a wake-up call, and we have to understand these principles. And the more we can incorporate them into devices like this and to everything that we use, the better we can work in harmony with nature, and the much better off everything will be for it. So the Quantaphi, let's say, for instance, if you were going to do meditation or whatever, you could use this in that situation. And you could create different aspects, listening to white noise, waterfalls, or waves, or whatever, depending on what you wanted to tune into. So you can use the Quantaphi in a room. Many people are using it in yoga studios and places like that, in their clinics. and conditioning the space so what you feel is what you're putting into there, and you're basically broadcasting it in a more uh, subtle way in creating fields with it. And that part of it is this idea of electromagnetic field protection. So if you're sitting next to your Wi-Fi router all day long, that thing is just screaming at you. If you listen to it and you translate the signals into more audible range, it sounds like fingernails on a chalkboard and screaming demons and things like this. So you're continuously being bombarded by that, and it's a lot of noise, and it's totally incoherent in a physical way, in a biological way. It's coherent in a computer way, in a digital way that says, these are bits of information streaming out. But when you're watching a video and you're transmitting this signal through your Wi-Fi and you're sitting next to your router, you're getting nailed with all this, what your body would just consider, random noise, and that's some of the effects. So if you turned on the Quantaphi inside the same room, your body's always trying to restore balance and go into homeostasis. So it's basically going to pick up a more coherent thing to tune into. It's kind of like when you're listening to the radio and you start tapping your feet and nodding your head, you go in sync with the music. And this is what the body just naturally does. So if you're playing something that is more acceptable to the body will tune into that rather than the noise. So that's the idea of how the basically electromagnetic pollution is negated with the Quantaphi. And yeah, the beauty of it is you can play any sounds you like through it, and that's what we'll talk about in a bit, is what sounds are beneficial and what sounds are not. Obviously, a lot of people run headlong into all these kind of things and think that every thing is going to be, on the aspect of healing with a lot of these devices that produce frequencies. But there's frequencies out there that you don't want to expose yourself to. And it's more noise and things like that than pure tones, when there's certain frequencies that are pure tones that can be damaging too, much like an opera singer with a wine glass hitting the specific resonant frequency of that wine glass. You can overpower it and cause it to shatter. So you have to use some caution when you're experimenting with frequencies, but Quantaphi was kind of made to be sort of a safe device to do that with. And you really know that these things are, having a positive effect on you when animals are attracted to them. I get a lot of stories where people will say their dog will come and he'll lay right in the field, right in the sweet spot in the counter space. And here's a couple of pictures people have sent with the cats and dogs. And animals are highly tuned in. People that work with horses and stuff with the Theraphi, they're very sensitive animals, and they know how much Theraphi they need. There's actually people that have a Theraphi system set up, and they walk horses through it, and the horse will walk into his little box, goes up little stairs up to the tubes, stand there, and he'll stand there for about 15 seconds, go, yeah, I'm good, and go on. That's how quickly the horses use the power of the Theraphi to quickly dial in. So a lot of people have been doing some great experiments and great testing and providing a lot of results with Theraphi and all kinds of different areas and aspects. These are some thermal graphs taken showing, you can really see inflammation when you see the temperature gradients and thermal images and before and after results. So reducing inflammation, increasing cellular communication, all these kind of things that are sort of benefits from the Theraphi all add up and seem to be quite powerful. And we're doing a lot of different groups out there, doing a lot of different research in different areas, even treating things like water and oils and different products like that. We make a lot of alchemical type tinctures and things like that, and treat them with the Theraphi. And It's really interesting, the effects. So Theraphi's effects on water alone um, are quite measurable and quite powerful. Just drinking water that you've placed in between the two tubes in the counter space area. And it doesn't take long, just a few minutes, and usually I spin things up. So if I had that bottle there, I would previously take the bottle and get it spinning and get it really spinning into a little vortex on there and put it in the field. When you move things in those spinning, just like the tubes are spinning in opposite directions around there, it just adds the spin on the spin on the spin, which is what everything in existence that we know is just waves upon waves upon waves, and these continual motion of flowing, and then it makes it more a better way of translating those fields. The Russians call them they called it spintronics, and this idea of these vortex fields. Here in the West, you hear the term scalar a lot. These kind of fields are what everybody's been referencing by these types of concepts, and they have a direct effect on water. We've measured results with Dr. Glenn Ryan, and showing an increase in the conductivity of the water. So that's showing that waters is polar molecules, and they have this way of aligning into all these really cool geometries. Pretty well all the platonic solids can be arranged out of the water molecules, and what they tend to do is form these uh, cages and sort of like looking like buckyballs, and very complicated geometries, especially around the minerals in the water. And so when they line up, they become more conductive. And in just a few minutes of treatment of Theraphi water, it increases that conductivity. And so other machines, he's talking about that process water, he's seen the Theraphi do in a few minutes of what took hours to do in other devices. And so some of the things that it does to the water, it provides a more negative charge in the water, and we see this in nature. It's part of why you spin in a vortex to begin with. When you spin a vortex around water, you create a polarity, and you create a positive charge and a negative charge through the flowing. Because the water moving is much like the flowing a mechanical system moving to generate electricity. When you move a magnet in front of a wire, it'll induce the current to the magnetism on there. And so it has the same kind of process as it's moving in those vortex structures. You can notice a difference in the taste of the water. Even when you use it for coffee, tea, foods like that, it'll taste better. Of course, there's many people out there who've been talking about structured water and these ideas of how it increases the slipperiness of the water, reducing the surface tension, and helping cellular respiration and things like that. Drinking water, obviously, lots of positive effects. And recently, a few years back now, Joe Pollock wrote the book Fourth Phase of Water. I spent a lot of time, many years, researching water over the years, and I tell you, when this book came out, it answered many questions. I knew there was a lot of strange phenomena that happened with water, but never was able to really understand why. And when I read this book, it just filled in all the missing pieces. And that's because water has these specific geometries, and it is capable of doing many things. When we really, really understand what water is, and then of course we're just scratching the surface still, but we'll understand how to make infinite energy production and how to completely cure the body of any disease. genetic material, so it's just showing that the Theraphi has influence on water. The water in the body is another big aspect of it. We're basically like a walking liquid crystal. As these geometries form in water, and what Gerald Pollack showed against surfaces where the geometry is aligned and the water molecules became chained together more like sheets of graphene, and then provided a potential difference across those surfaces, and showed how all this happens in biological systems as well. And DNA is no exception to that. The DNA itself is held together with, tetrahedral blocks of water that support all that DNA and along the strands. And so it's utilizing the water's crystalline capability to support that lattice structure all around it. And that has a lot to do with the energetics of the interaction between hydrogen and oxygen. And we find it over and over throughout all kinds of biological processes. So one of the things we've been experimenting with is the Aquaphi. I mentioned a few years back that it's possible to make a similar process into water that's going to be very beneficial for plants. And so the Aquaphi has been, it's been a bit of a back burner project. It's moving more forward now. We're starting to do some actual studies with it. And coming in the future, we're going to start to be able to release these to get out to more people to do some experiments with. But essentially what the Aquaphi is doing is taking these same principles and embedding those into water, and we're using the water for watering plants. It's not a drinking water for people. You aren't able to drink this particular version of the water because it's designed for agricultural purposes. Maybe we'll have a device someday for drinking water. I know a lot of people have asked, and I was like, well, I spent a lot of time working on that years ago, and I don't know if I want to go back too far. But the agricultural component of the possibilities for using these type of technologies is huge. And Aquaphi's, once we start to do our testing with it, from what the initial results have kind of shown, is going to be really beneficial, especially for green leafy vegetables, stuff like this, like lettuce and things like that. It provides an energetic source to the water that wasn't there before, and it organizes the water. It has all kinds of properties like helping the vegetation growth, the cellular integration, respiration, and communication. As well as when plants are charged with this highly charged water, and insects fly by. The reason why insects basically they're 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 there for a reason. It's not that you have to spray everything and use insecticides and pesticides, fungicides, and all these other genocides that are going on right now. You just have to charge up the plants, because when the insects are flying through the field, they basically see unhealthy plants and they attack the unhealthy plants, and they're part of nature's process to break down that unhealthy plants into other matter, go back into the earth and start all over again. When you spray them with water from the Aquaphi, the insects see, they're very sensitive to that highly charged plant, and they won't attack those plants. So it's another way of not only being the natural fertilizer, if you want to call that, but a natural pesticide. So it's going to be interesting where that goes, and stay tuned for a couple test projects that we're doing right now. We'll let everybody know when we get some results from that. And yeah, I think that's about it. We'll pass it over to Roger, and he can talk about some upcoming events and where we're at here now.
Yeah, just briefly, folks, we're going to maybe get Paul to unshare his screen, and we're going to take some. You just leave that slide up for a sec, Paul.
Okay.
But just so folks know our program today, we're going to open it up to some questions and answers now, but then we're going to come back to Paul because he's got some fun and games to show us with some of the little sound geometry that he's been working with in his workshop there. So you will get some updates on the upcoming Breakthru-Technologies conference. This is that picture down below there is the way we used to get together in the good old days. And of course, you know, we're all missing getting together. That's at our Breakthru-Technologies and Theraphi conference in South France. And of course, Paul was planning to have another conference in Canada last year. And of course, we had to cancel it this year. And so hopefully next year, folks, you know, we can get together in one of these beautiful locations. So what we thought was we're going to put on an online get together this coming November. It's going to be a combination of Theraphi, Paul's going to be presenting, and Dan Winter. But we're actually doing a smorgasbord of thinking outside of the box technologies, everything from cold fusion projects to green hydrogen. And we also incorporate sacred geometry. For all of us involved with these technologies, part of our discipline is understanding these beautiful harmonics and ratios of nature and the cosmos, which is basically the study of sacred geometry. So I've got together some of the top teachers in sacred geometry, Scott Olson and Jane and Jonathan Quinton and several other teachers. So it's going to be an intensive 3 days. We're going to have it in this format, this meeting format, so we can sort of have breakout rooms and some questions and basically get to know, a chance for you to get to know this community. We've been doing this for the last over 10 years now, these Breakthru-Technologies. So that's going to be a lot of fun and games, and you will be seeing some more references to that through the database. So maybe, what else have you got there in slides? Is that the end of the slides, Paul?
Yeah, I think that one there is the basic dates and everything like that. Yeah.
So if you unshare your screen.
There we go.
So now we're able to go back to our group. And okay, guys, I know there's a few questions. We'd like to do the questions live if we can. I know some of you have been asking questions in the chat window. My preference for that now would be if you could just email info@theraphi.tech and I'll be able to officially answer any questions. But for now, we'd like to just open it up because we have lots of friends here and people have been running. There's a lot of Theraphi centers all over the world now, and you can find those locations up on the website. And so,
well, actually, how are we doing for time, Roger? Because maybe it'd be best if I did this little demo here.
Yeah, it's up to you, Paul. If you want to do the demo first.
Okay. Yeah, let's. I just wanted to talk a little bit before we got into the questions about people have been asking what I've been experimenting with was in terms of frequencies and using sounds and complex waveforms and how they're working. And I wanted to show basically a little idea about the sound of geometry and how I'm working with sounds and producing the sounds from the geometry. So that's why I'm sitting here in the studio, and I'll switch over my camera here. Do you see that? Does it change the camera?
Yeah, it came up.
Okay. And okay, I'll switch over the mic.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep. Sounds coming through.
Okay, I'm just gonna switch the cameras over so you can see what I'm sitting in front of here. It's basically a synthesizer. These are sort of modular synthesizers, several little modules that do all kinds of different things and make different sounds. And one of the ones I'm using is called the Polygogo, and I can switch the camera over to it here. And you can see it creates a visual with an X and a Y axis in this little screen here. And it's actually playing the sound of where the light goes on the screen. So in the X dimension, you have one channel, and the Y dimension in the other. So right now, you can see a little dot there, and switch it in so you can hear what that sounds like. So it's just this dot on the screen, and I can change the frequency. And as I add frequency to it, it speeds up. And so this is the sound. Does everybody hear that okay?
Yeah,
hear
it's
that?
coming through.
Yeah, sounds
Yep.
good. If I rotate that line, I'll change from the x-axis to the y-axis, and you'll hear that sound go from your left channel to your right channel. So I can introduce this phasing, which starts to form these geometries in the spin. And if we go back, we can increase the envelope here to get it to be a triangle. That basically, you assign the frequency to the shape, and if I start to spin the shape, you'll get the phasing in the two channels. Now I can increase the sides of this polygons, and we can hear a square, pentagram. Can quantize these as well, and it basically adds sides to the polygon here. So you can do a lot of neat things with this, and it has a lot of interesting effects on some of these frequencies. You might be able to feel some of these things. In the early days, this is what we called psychotronics, where we're able to influence brain patterns and biological systems with sound and light. And this little guy has been really handy for creating some of these things. And you can get very complex geometries and sounds with this. So if you ever wondered what the sound of a pentagram was, well, there it is. And you can spin it, and you can add corners to it. And so, yeah, this is basically what I've been working on with the various sounds of geometries, I guess, if you will. I'll just switch back over to here. Yeah, I just thought that would be
Fun to see. Go back to the video. There, you can hear me again now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, jump out of that system.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the kind of complicated geometries and sounds I've been working with to interact with these biologic producing in these bioactive fields. And it gets really complicated, and it's a lot of fun.
No, that's great, Paul.
Yeah.
So as I said, just a quick, word from your sponsor here. At the end of this month, the 29th of September, we've got a orientation done by Inga with the Academy Healing Nutrition. And that's a program that I've been running for over 35 years with natural healing, Taoist tonic herbal medicine, how to cook with the longevity herbs. It's very practical. We combine theory and practical work. I've been running a cooking school for over 35 years, and we actually able to do that online with the Zoom format. So it's a global program now. We used to have centers in New York, London, and Prague, but because of our current situation, we've put it totally online over the last year, and it's been very, very successful. That program is starting again this October. There's 10 modules, a module is a weekend spaced over the year. Brilliant team, really good backup, wonderful resources. So that orientation is starting this 29th of September. So you're going to get a little blurb on that with the recording. And then November the 5th, 6th, and 7th, an intensive 3 days of Breakthru-Technologies, Theraphi, sacred geometry, you name it, with some of the best teachers. I've been putting on sacred geometry. I called it the Sacred Geometry Celebration, and we have like the Academy Healing Nutrition, we also have the Academy Sacred Geometry. And as I said, that's kind of like the backbone to a lot of these amazing technologies that we're presenting to the world. So you'll be seeing some updates with that through the newsletter, yeah? So thanks, guys. I'll get the recording out to you in a couple of days. Wonderful to see some faces here. Like there's Alan Rode there. Hi, Alan. And
everybody that we got to talk to and didn't get.
We don't sit on our bums, guys. We've got all sorts of things coming out. Alan's been involved with what we call the Teslatron, which was based on Belinsky's oboe up in New York State, who actually passed away, one of the American geniuses, and we actually have dedicated our conferences to Belinsky. He was working on a Tesla healing machine for the last 20, 30 years of his life. And Alan and I would go up every month and spend a lot of time with Oboe. And so that's called the Teslatron. And Alan and Paul have picked up the pieces of that, and it's in development. So in about a year or so, we'll have more, but that's the sort of thing that you're going to hear more about in the upcoming Breakthru-Technologies in November, and updates on all sorts of energy systems, including, for instance, cold fusion. I really have some of the top experts on that at the conference, and wonderful, really interesting projects with hydrogen antennas with Dan Winter, and hypersonic propulsions, you name it. We really push the envelope. We don't believe in envelopes. So thank you, guys. Wonderful to see you. Thanks, Paul and Kelly, up there in Canada. It looks very cozy in that uke that you've got there.
And Roger,
thank you
so much. I want to just say that it was Roger that prompted us and said, you know what, community needs to gather now. It's important. We haven't seen each other since in person. The opportunity was 2019. And yeah, it's been a long time. So I just really want to honor and say thank you, Roger. Really great work. Thank you for all of your effort, because not only now, but all the other times, I don't know why, I just feel this overwhelming feeling of gratitude towards you right now, and it's bringing tears to my eyes.
Oh, Kelly is bringing tears to my eyes. Thank you.
Yeah, just and to all the community that has come together right now.
Thank you to everybody.
It's just beautiful to see so many faces. And so many people in this world community. It's just, it's a blessing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Paul. Wonderful presentation too, Paul. Really interesting. Thanks for that. So thanks, guys, for attending. And we'll see you in the future at some of these future events. And bye for now.
Well done.
Greetings from Sydney, Australia. And it's a beautiful day. The morning is just starting here.